Oh,
Okay, I'd like to introduce Kimberley Connors. Kimberly's passion is helping people see beyond the glare of the present to the hidden landscape of the past. Kimberly founded Archaeology Outreach, a program that has presented talks and tours on a variety of subjects such as colonial America, women's lives in the 18th century, and archaeology around the Concord, Acton, Carlisle area, and also the battles with the British around Concord. Kimberly's talk tonight on Native American sacred geography is of particular interest to me as a humanist, because the indigenous people conceived the idea of sacred geography independently of any Judeo-Christian religious concepts. So they somehow developed this concept of sacredness of geography, which is sort of religious concept. I look forward to her talk. Thank you. Take it away, Kimberly.
I see her logging in again. Kimberly, are you ready to proceed?
It kicked me out for a moment. Paul, can you enable the share? Oh, it is excellent. Thank you, Paul. All right. So, hi, everyone. There we go. So thank you very much for having me tonight, Concord Humanists. I am an archaeologist, and I, as the past chair of the Acton Historical Commission, I've gotten to know a bit of the local Native American sites and sacred thoughts, and I hope to share them with you tonight. So first of all, let me start by saying that I acknowledge that the traditional ancestral lands of the Indigenous Massachusetts Nation and Nipmuc Nation, and that they were always here before the Europeans came across the water. Where we live is a place where their lawfully deeded land with systematic rights were systematically taken from them, and they were forcibly removed first to Neshoba and subsequently to Deer Island, where many were starved and died of exposure. Some survived, but were written out of history, and this erasure continues to this day.
Kimberly, you're
So sacred, yes.
you're showing the full presentation. You need to just narrow down to the screen. Are you showing your desktop or?
Is it not working?
We're getting the menus, the side panels and the menu overhead, not just you're not in presentation mode. It was working before we started
You have to press the button that's like a square with an arrow pointing up. It's on the up.
Got it. All right. All right. So auto hide, show tags. Where is it?
Maybe go to view.
View.
next to
Or, oh wait, no, sorry. In the upper right, there's like a play button.
Ribbon display.
Well,
Present in.
You see, like it's like sort of looks like a up a little bit, up a little bit. There's like looks like a desk with a play button. Try that.
Is that it? Did
Yep.
that work?
Nope. I'm
No
sorry.
All right, so let me stop sharing. I do apologize. We are definitely having Zoom updated and no one knows how to use it any longer. Okay, let's try it again. So I'm sharing screen. Share. Is it working?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Liv. I appreciate that. So I am Kimberley Connors, and we are talking about sacred geography today. Come on. And sacred geography, many people, I was taught in anthropology that sacred geography is all nature is regarded as being sacred, yet certain geographic features are more prominent than others. Most people think of like Stonehenge, and that Stonehenge on the Asbury Plain Inn is a place where people came geographically for both sacred and celestial events. This too happens in Native American culture out west. One of the best known is the medicine wheel in Wyoming. It's limestone laid upon limestone. It dates back as early as 3200 before the Common Era. It has 28 spokes for the 28 days of the lunar calendar. And sacred ceremonies and scientific inquiry in the Indigenous community are often intertwined in a way that it's difficult for non-natives to understand. But the inner wheel and the outer wheel probably is for ambulation, and it aligns with many of the solar, the east-west, the equinoxes, the known phases, lunar and solar eclipses, and the orbits of the planet. There are many others that we think of grand ones, like in Monument Valley or the Lakota, Black Hills, and then places for vision quests and sweat baths and other ritual settings, such as the mounds in Hopewell in Ohio. Now, I was taught that the four directions are also called the medicine wheel, and that you honor them. Typically, I don't know why I have white at the top, but typically, typically you start with yellow for the east, red for the south, black, and then white. In the Southwest, I was also taught above and below in the Kiva cultures, such as the Pueblo culture. They believed that people came up from below, and that, like the Anasazi, left from above. We have the four directions, the four colors as well, right here in Massachusetts. This is Aquinnah, which is formerly known as Gayhead on Martha's Vineyard. They believe, the Wampanoag of Aquinnah believe that Mushup, please, before I go any further, please excuse any Algonquin words that I mispronounce. I'm still getting to know the words, the correct pronunciations. They believed that a benevolent giant looked out for their people, and when he would fish for whales, and he liked roasted whale meat, he would take the whale and throw it against the cliff. He would then roast the whale and share the meat as a potlatch with all of the tribal members. So a potlatch is like a shared feast that we have, so everyone has. And then the colors are that are under the cliff represent those the blood of the whale, the black of the charcoal, and the white of the feasting together. I've always really liked this. And in Massachusetts, because we have a hidden history here in Massachusetts, most people are very familiar with our county map, or maybe not as much, but there are 13 counties in Massachusetts. And hidden underneath them are the original names and places that Native Americans were occupying long before we started making maps of the area. Now we, in the general Concord area, are right here. We are the Massachusetts people, and we're in this area on this map. Basically Salem, almost to Lowell, and then down to Neponset, which is Quincy, just south of Quincy, and over to the coast, out to like the Blue Hill. This is almost where 128 is now. I do think the Massachusetts people would think that some of the Wampanoag is a little into their area, but that's for other people to decide. But there are so many different groups, languages, and places on this map. We tend to think of things in the past as being monoculture, and it's not at all. It is a myriad of wonderfully diverse cultures, all within the Massachusetts landscape. And it shows up in the names. Now, not many people think of Boston as being Shawmut as much as they once did. The Shawmut Peninsula is where Boston is located. And this is all the way back to the earliest map of 1692. Of course, this is all filled in. This is Back Bay here. This is Roxbury Neck. And it doesn't look like what modern Boston does, but Shawmut actually in Algonquin means a place of clear waters. I've also seen a place of many waters, and both make sense. The Shawmut Diner unfortunately closed during the pandemic. That was in New Bedford. Shawmut Station on the T. The Shawmut Building, that's in town. And this was the seat of the Massachusetts, in which they pronounce, this is Blue Hill in now modern day Canton, and it was pronounced Massachusetts. And that's where we get our state's name. And that was the sachem seat. So the sachem of the tribe of the Massachusetts was called Massachusetts, and this was his seat. I was taught that when all things are sacred, how can I hide this? I'm trying to hide. There we go. Thank you. All right. So I was taught that when all things are sacred, that's called animism. And I was taught about Shintoism in Japan. In the idea that every natural thing has a spirit and is sacred. just in being. The Native Americans, pre-contact, before the Europeans came, archaeologists call that the contact period. Pre-contact, the land was not something that anyone owned. People belonged to the earth. There was no word for ownership. Instead of them, instead of being I'm from this place, it's the idea is this place is where the earth is my mother. She bore me here. It's a difference that caused many miscommunications, I believe, especially during the contact period when people were purchasing land from the indigenous populations. Now, can I hide that? So Native Americans also have a stone ceremonial landscape. And this is often hidden to non-Indigenous peoples. It's an unintended bias, but the stereotype of being nomads is firmly implanted in our modern culture. It's both in education, in textbooks, as well as the mass media representation of Indigenous peoples. It's just kind of aimlessly wandering about. It's not true. And archaeology often finds that they did build sacred landscapes in stone. Sometimes standing stones. You can have rows, stone circles like the one down here in Groton, Connecticut. It's Gunny Wump. And stone chambers, I'll show you that in a minute, and effigies. In particular, you find a lot of effigies. This is a turtle effigy up top here of the Narragansett tribe. And this, down in Rhode Island as well, is a split wedged boulder. These are things that are completely ceremony in nature. They have no other purpose. And it's not something that colonial peoples would have done. But I often hear, not around here. Sure, they have that down in southern Massachusetts, but southern New England, but not around here. Well, when I first became chair of the Acton Historical Commission, this was called the Potato Cave, and it was going to be bulldozed. So I went out and checked it out, crawled on my belly, and recognized pretty quickly when I went inside that this was not a stone cave. At the Potato Cave, this was not at all a cave, but was in fact a stone chamber. And I could tell because of this corbelled column. Here's a better picture. Here's a better drawing of it here that was done by the Acton Department of Rec, I think. Tom Tidman did the drawing. So we got a grant from CPA. We removed the vegetation. We put in braces to hold it up so it wouldn't totally collapse. And we started to do the archaeological work of reconstructing it, removed all of the dirt from on top of the slabs. The slabs were huge, and sifted all the dirt. And then we had Professor David Stewart Smith, from the University of Vermont and his assistant Pete do the reconstruction. David learned stone masonry in Scotland and had a very keen eye for things that had reuse. He believed that this is the reconstruction as it is now on the Neshoba Brook Conservation Area. It's part of the Trail Through Time. And David felt that this had a reuse that was earlier. It was definitely used as an ice house during the colonial period, but we have that seems to be a reuse of the site. Let me go back because I've got these out of it. And we know there were 300 stone chambers documented around New England. They share that corbelling system for the roof. Corbelling is when you take a column and you stack out the stone so as that it holds up the roof. The most famous corbelling is in the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is then covered with earth. They're often mistaken to be natural caves with possible orientations for celestial events. Now, on the left here, you see the inside and the outside of the most famous. This is the one in Hopkinton. Many people know this one. And this one is down in Pequot, down in Connecticut. And this is misinterpreted as a fieldstone dwelling, which it is not. So one of the things that, I used to live by, someone saying they used to live by Strawmont Station. Yeah, in Dorchester, that's exactly right. So one of the ways I got interested in this is that I kept hearing, especially in Acton and Carlisle, and not as much in Concord, but and in Littleton, that people would find stone piles. And they would contact us on the Historical Commission, and they would say, what should I do? I really believe this is Native American. Well, the Massachusetts Historical Commission and the Department of Conservation Resources, I may have that wrong right now, they totally believe, the DCR, they say that this is a myth, that there are no stone piles that are related to Native American settlement in Massachusetts. They say that they have professional research, and that they often appear to be linear or geometric because, through randomization. Well, come on, you. This is what a field clearing pile looks like. This is a farm in Westford. This is a farm in southern New Hampshire. And it is many different rocks, usually in one part of the field, so as that when they were plowing, they wouldn't get in the way, and they would grow over time. You could see like there were bigger ones at sometimes and less at others. And this is a surveyor's pile, something Henry David Thoreau might have placed when he was working as a surveyor. These are different. These stone piles are very different. They're low. They are not in any set pattern in the places that I've been that would allow a farmer to plow. And agriculturally, that's what you needed to be able to do, or have an orchard, either one. This is not something that they, the New England farmer would not have spent their time making these stone piles, in my opinion, in these particular areas. So on the Trail Through Time, I've documented them and done some drawings and some readings. They don't have, they just don't look like agricultural stone piles to me. I can't imagine. Number 13 here is on the right, and you see the back and the front of it. I can't imagine that a Yankee farmer would take their time to put rocks on top of rocks in a split like that. And Native Americans say they're theirs. They say it. They've been saying it for a long time, and we don't listen. And one of the reasons that they are not listened to when they say that they are theirs, in my opinion, is the doctrine of unimproved lands. The Charter of Massachusetts Bay said that they could only take unimproved lands. Therefore, anything like this would be considered improved. Therefore, they stopped. They didn't see it as improved to not impede the taking of the land and changing the deeds. And it continues to this day. We don't see it. Now, there are other ceremonial sites that are no question. This is in Grafton. It's the Hananamasset Nipmuc peoples, and this is their Indian burial ground. There was a praying village there as well. And here, this boulder inside, so right in the middle of the cemetery is this one boulder, and it's propped up with these small rocks. So is that it's got a little bit of a lift to it. This is something you see a lot. Things that were not, I don't see the glaciers having left them like this. This is a changed landscape that was done by the Indigenous people. There are other sacred burial sites. The most famous is Masconomet. He was the Sagamore of the Agawam, and they were on the North Shore, Cape Ann up to Lowell, basically. And when they sold the property of the town of what is now Ipswich, he died and was buried in 1659. A young man dug up his remains and carried his skull and was imprisoned and sent to the stocks, it says in the record. And he had to pay a fine and rebury the skull and bones. And he built a 2-foot high pile of stones of the grave. In Native American tradition, the spirit of a person is called back when his grave is disturbed in any way. After the bones are found, a proper burial must be performed by his people before he can rest. Therefore, the original reinterment in 1659 was not spiritually correct. In 1910, they reinterred the bones with a Native American ceremony. And you can see to this day, people still remember Masconomet and leave things on his grave, which is one of the ideas of why the stone piles. The stone piles were to not necessarily burial markers, but to remember specific events. Could be people as well. The stone piles in Acton are very close to what I have identified as a pest house, a house owned by Dr. Jonathan Davies, and who became Davis in the beginning of the 19th century. So perhaps people were visiting that area, and they started making these stone piles. Now, Native Americans, if you ask them themselves, they'll tell you that they weren't wanderers or vagrants. They knew what they were doing. They knew where they were going. They, even after they lost title to their land, they retained customary right of access and returned there to places that were culturally significant. This is the chief of the Nipmuc Nation of the Hanamanesco band. This is of the Nipmuc. This is they're principally in Connecticut, this group. And once there's that English doctrine stating that unimproved lands could be legally claimed. The idea of seasonal moment within a decided territory is one that we understand, I think, somewhat, but not truly can see in our own landscape. If you've ever been to Alewife, as many of us have on the North Shore, we go into, in the Route 2 corridor, we go into Cambridge, we park there, we catch the T. Well, alewife is really a fish. It is a type of herring, and it has runs in May and June. And the pond that is there right outside of the station is where there was a fishing weir. This is where the Menotomy, they were of the Massachusetts, and this is where they had their fishing catch. They would summer at the beach, like in a hunt, and then they would, in the fall, they would go and collect the nuts that would be falling at that time, and they would winter at their hunting grounds, which was what is today the Fells Parkway Reservation in Melrose. Well, that idea of being on the land in certain times for certain specific food gathering, I always tell the kids, it's all about staying alive, and that's what they were trying to do. So the Pine Hawk site is a 7 before the present site in South Acton. It's on the Assabet River. I took this picture yesterday looking up the Assabet River from the Mill Pond. It is in this, when I say South Acton, I mean it, but there's Concord. So Powder Mill Road goes right along here. You can just see a little bit of it, and then it goes into Concord here. And then where it becomes Main Street. And it's right on 62. I took these yesterday as well. You can see that the current dam shows a slight falls. It looks to be about 5 to 10 feet. This is the first drop. There's another one. This would have been an excellent place for fishing. and an easy place to portage canoes because it's not too steep. There are low banks. It's still a good place to fish, obviously. On the left-hand side, there's one of the couple of great blue herons I saw fishing when I was out there. And the site's hidden in the tree line here. It currently is where the South Acton sewer treatment plant is. Pine Hawk was excavated by the Public Archaeology Lab. As I said, it's a sewer treatment plant. It's currently on Adams Street. There is something called a Section 106 review that is any government funded, federally funded project has to have an archaeological survey. They don't have to do a lot, just 1%. However, even that small, though I think they might have done 10% at Pine Hawk, these test pits showed extensive occupation. They have this site has the classic characteristics of a Native American site, which is this is from the parking lot. It has a large flat terrace. It is overlooking the river, and it is has good drainage and also an excellent vantage point, so in case there was someone coming up the river that you might not want to see. Pine Hawk is in the Middle Archaic period, which is 7,000 to 3,000 before the present. The site also had occupation through the late Archaic. There was a gap of 1,500 years, and then in the woodland era, it had a low frequency, and then just one group with seasonal occupation during the contact era. It was done as rescue archaeology, 2 by 2 meter grid, 100 centimeter squares. 2 by 2 meters, that should be 200 centimeter squares with 5 centimeters lifts. That's small. That's about that much. They sifted the soils and then documented it before the bulldozers came in. This is just a little bit of what they found. They found thousands and thousands of stone tools, an amazing amount. And at this early time, they were hunting with an atlatl, which is a spear thrower. And it would torque a long dart with a small point on the end. They also used handheld spears for fishing. Has anyone ever seen an atlatl? All right, excellent. Now, bow and arrows didn't come in until the woodland period, about 1,500 years ago. And I'd like to acknowledge all these sketches were made by Kit Little Turtle, who was the medicine man for the Ipmuc Indian Council, and he partnered with Acton and Pell on the educational program and interpretation. I'm very grateful for that. He passed away within the last 10 years, and I don't know what they would have done without this. Now, they found all kinds of tools on the site. To archaeologists, this means that they were doing all kinds of different work. Tiny scrapers, bifacial, and then projectile points, better known as arrowheads. They were traveling around the Assabet. They had seasonal homes to hunt, work, hide, fish, and make tools. There were fewer The interpretation is with only one group using pottery, so that would be the middle woodland period, and then that all stopped. I put as a note on the bottom, this is incomplete evidence because it's due to the rescue nature of the excavations and only one abbreviated season. They didn't even do a complete 4 weeks. They just did enough to satisfy the 106 and get as much documentation as they could before the bulldozers came in. What I was most interested in, so when I moved to Acton, this was still, this site was published as a report to the town in 2001. And I moved into Acton in 2004, and in 2005, we were getting some of the artifacts, and we were getting, doing programs on this. And I was most interested in the pits that showed caches of nuts. Now, stone tools, points, scrapers, things like that. Those are easy to carry with you, but grinding stones are not. And we know that the trees, so they found hazelnut, hickory, and acorns, 43 fragments. So I decided to look for this. One of the things that we often don't understand is that they practiced horticulture and not agriculture. Agriculture often tries to use the exact same land over and over again, and with trying to change what it has, whereas in horticulture, they work within the landscape they have. They grow in plots, and then they move on. And then they working different areas for the next. And then they would move back to that one again. They had a very long-term look at growing food that we no longer have. So, come on. I looked, where could it be? So here's Pine Hawk. Here's Powder Mill Road, here's the pond. And I knew that on the map, there was something called a grinding stone in Great Hill, at Great Hill. That's behind the South Acton Fire Station on School Street. So I went looking and I found it. And I totally believe that this is where all of the nuts that they harvested were being treated. Not only does it have to be ground, the nuts have to be leached to tannins, and they would do so in pits like this, putting in rocks that were boiling, that were red hot to boil the water. It would have to be done over a 24-hour to 48-hour period to leach all the tannins out. And this is a deep enough area. I just to see that. That's on the lower part of Great Hill. If you're ever in Acton, it's right off of Piper Road. And the white oak, as a matter of fact, all the oak leaves are coming down, but the white oak has less tannins, and it makes the acorns easier to work with. So before I go to the next part, does anyone have any questions before I go on to the next part? Paul?
I have a question. Where is Neshoba?
Oh,
I mean, I know where the Neshoba Brook is, but
so Neshoba, the praying village?
okay.
Okay, is that what you mean? Because of the, right, so there's the Neshoba Brook Conservation Area that is between Pope Road in Concord and Acton, and that goes all the way to 27 to Main Street in Acton. It
Mhm.
also borders Carlisle and Chelmsford on the backside. So
Oh,
it's
so
a
that
big,
area is Neshoba.
yep,
Okay.
exactly. That's the Neshoba Conservation Area.
Mhm.
Neshoba, the praying village is what was called Newtown. And that is Littleton, Boxborough, almost all of the town of Littleton with a little bit of Boxborough and Acton, like Nagog, where Nagog is. The last remnants of it are where Nagog Pond is now.
Hmm.
All right. Does anyone else speak up if you have another question? Okay. I'll go back to sharing. Come on. There we go. Okay. So one of the things, let me get back and come on. There we go. Oh, yeah. That's not what I wanted it to do. My apologies. I'm a little sick of Zoom. I bet you guys are too. So one of the things I hear often is, why don't Native Americans speak up?
You
This
probably
is
have to,
theirs.
you,
Pardon?
I think you need to unshare and then share it again. We've got
Okay.
the,
Oh, it's doing it again. I wish they had not updated Zoom. This is a lot harder than it used to be. All right, let me just make sure there's nothing else open. All right, here we go. Let's try again. Slideshow from current slide. Come on, you. All right. Share screen. Did that work?
it's still got the sidebars,
How's that?
sidebars.
I
It says, why don't Native Americans speak up? But it's got the headers and
does it?
yes, and it's
Huh.
got the side list of slides there.
I don't know why. Okay, oh, I see. All right, why don't, oh, I see. Okay. Now let's try. All right, I just ended up closing my PowerPoint. I don't know why there were two running on here. Oh boy. Okay, so I might have to go. Let's go in here. So let me make sure. I'm not sharing right now, am I?
No.
Okay, good. I'm just checking.
Yeah, I would put it in presentation mode. So it's filling up your whole screen and then click screen share.
Yeah, I tried that. We will try again, Liv.
You got this.
I appreciate your help. I need all the help I can get. All right, here it is as a download, because I know better than to use my Google Slides. I know that doesn't work. Come on. No, shush. Now.
Maybe we can just ignore the sidebars. I think we can still see the things in the middle.
Does that work?
Yes.
Yay! But thank you. That would have been my next choice. So I have heard this often. People, why don't they speak up? Well, they do and they don't. First of all, as I said, there is a the frequently asked question part of the Mass Historical Commission that says that what Native Americans say are part of their culture, we don't believe it. That doesn't help. The other thing is that we keep Native American sites secret. And it's in the Massachusetts Historical Commission runs a program of database called MACRIS. And all of the Native American sites you cannot get to them. And I understand that. It's so is that people it is not damaged by neo-pagans or people looking to loot the sites. But because we don't show them, it makes it look like there aren't any. And that's not true. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They're everywhere. Historically, many Native American sacred sites are still denied to Native groups, such as Deer Island. Now, during King Philip's War, what we now call as praying Indians, they were Christianized Native American indigenous peoples. They had been forced into praying villages before King Philip's War, and both sides attacked them. Both Metacomet, which is King Philip's real name, Metacomet, as well as militias would blame them. If there was a raid, they would blame the people in the praying villages, even though they had nothing to do with it. They were grounded up at gunpoint and forcibly incarcerated on islands. In fact, the people from Neshoba Praying Village were kept in a stockade on Lexington Road in Concord prior to being marched in the winter down the Bay Road all the way to the boats that brought them over to the islands. They had little or no food. Many died, most did die of starvation and exposure, but some survived, and many went back to Natick, which it was where most of them, but there were still people that came back to the Neshoba Praying Village as well. The last landholder of was deeded to Sarah Doublet, and she sold the last 600 acres to Jones, who lived in South Acton at the Jones Tavern, and she lived there in the back of the tavern in exchange for her selling her land when she died, deeding him her land. Native American descendants canoe out to Deer Island to commemorate the event and their ancestors. And during the construction of the sewer treatment plant on Deer Island, the one that's so important about taking COVID samples, they destroyed the graves of the Native Americans that perished there under the forced occupancy. There we go. So in Natick, as I mentioned, where many of the area island went to Natick. They still have the Natick church there, the Praying Village Church. So in 2017, the state upped all the fees, and whereas this had been their land, this was their land, they were charging them $400 a day. This is Lake Contituate, and there was nothing they could do. Chief Carringham says there's a sadness that comes with it. And more recently, during the pandemic, there was an early archaic site found in Deerfield, and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation wanted to put it under a big roundabout, a big circle, a rotary. And in the small survey that was done, that the owners of the land did, they found 500 artifacts in the survey. And perhaps because it was during the pandemic, the public outcry was huge. They got 10,000 online signatures. People were calling them up saying, don't do this. And this site was saved. This is a rare thing, but it was saved. And now the University of Massachusetts is going to partner with this Indigenous group to understand and preserve the site as best they can. Now, one of the things that I was very surprised about is that there is no federal statute that protects sacred sites, Native American sacred sites. You might have heard of the Dakota, the oil pipeline, and Standing Rock on the Sioux Reservation. Also in Hawaii, we have the 30-meter telescope is on tribal land. And Paul sent me this one. This is the Yakama Nation versus the U.S. Department of Transportation, Fish and Wildlife, and the Washington State Department of Transportation. They bulldozed a sacred site for a left-hand signal lane into the park. And they removed a stone altar, burial grounds, and sacred trees. They are suing on religious grounds. The Supreme Court is supposed to make a determination whether or not they will take it up in January of 2023. But they are still here. As they say, we are still here. This is the North American Indian Center of Boston. There's also a different group out at Devon's. And there are over 6,000 Native Americans from 30 bands, tribes, and nation that lives in the Boston area. They have powwows in many different places. This is interesting. I got this right off of their website. This lists Concord as a powwow site. That's interesting. There are Wabanaki or Abenaki speaking people as well, including the Micmac, the Abenaki, the Pemasquatty, and the Penobscot, Wampanoag, Wampanoag, Nipmuc, Narragansett, and Mohegan. Many self-identify as Christians, yet they also do the ceremonial celebrations in the traditional Native American calendar with the celestial cycles, the green corn harvest, which is always a great one, and the changing of the seasons. I like this New Year's celebration at the end of April. What a nice time to do that. And that's me chasing walls out in the woods. And that's all I have. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pamela, how are we doing on questions in the chat?
I think everybody is just absorbing it.
Do we
Are-
ask our
are there-
questions in the chat? Oh, sorry.
I don't think there's any questions in the chat. So feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand or your virtual hand and yes, Sarah.
Yeah, that was amazing, Kimberly. Thank you so much for all of that. I'm curious, do you ever lead hikes or anything? Like explain, lead, you do that? Oh my
I do.
gosh.
I do, as a matter of fact. And now that the leaves are down, it's easier to see. It's easier to see. And I typically do hikes from now until like April. So I would love, perhaps I should get one and announce it to you guys.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to join that if you do organize something like that. And then I had a couple quick questions about, I grew up in Hopkinton and I actually had never heard of, and I was wondering where that stone chamber was in Hopkinton.
So I found it, there were quite a few New England stone landscape. I haven't been there. I've only seen the pictures. You want to go, Sarah? Sounds like a road trip.
I would love to go. Any day I would meet you there. I would love that.
It is, I don't think it's far from 495 though.
Okay.
That's my impression.
Okay, my last quick question about Hopkinton is I grew up near Peppercorn. I don't know if you've heard of Peppercorn Hill, and we were told, I had heard that there was some sacred geography there, something to do with the Pleiades. And as a kid, I grew up looking for it, like in the stones and the hills, and I never found, and I don't know if that's one of those like, more secret. I almost want to ask, do you know of that? Do you know where it is?
I do
The
not,
secret
and
list.
it hasn't been
Okay.
shared with me. However, I do know that the Pleiades are very important in the celestial calendar, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if there was a spot there.
Okay, all right. Well, those are my
Yeah.
questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, you're welcome.
Liv?
Hi, thank you so much. That was incredible. So I have two quick questions. How did you find yourself in this realm? Like what first inspired you to follow this path specifically?
Okay. So when I was when I was at Plymouth State, I needed summer credits, and there was a dig one town over, and so I went for a field school so as I could get summer credits, and it changed my whole life. And that was a contact era. And then the next one I did in New Hampshire, that was Paleo American. That was an old one, and 10,000 years old. And I found I excavated what became the signature projectile point arrowhead of the whole season. So I got bitten pretty bad after that. I've been to the Middle East as well. And when I moved to here, there was no question that I wanted to use and volunteer to the town, whatever abilities I had for, if not recognizing, documenting everything I could find. Thank you, Liv.
Yeah. So like just jumping off that, is there like a community of people like you who are aware of local sites? And it makes me wonder if there was a way to preserve this information for future generations of people. But like you said, you mentioned kind of keeping the site safe from looting and damage. Like how, do you think there could be a way where there's like a map where you could look at all the sites without damaging them?
I really think we need to do that. I really believe we do. And because as I said, by keeping them secret, we have the false impression that there aren't any. Liv, there is, I mean, really think we should do a trail through time hiking, a little hike. And this is Acton. It's Acton, because Acton destroyed such an important site under their sewer. They have gone out of their way to make sure that they are extremely aware. They just passed an archaeological bylaw that I helped write when I still lived in town, when I was still in the Historical Commission. And, you know, there's a lot in Littleton, because there are still descendants of the Neshoba praying people, the people that lived in the Neshoba praying village. And they go up to Sarah Doublet Forest. There are groups that do that, that you might be very interested in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Edith?
I think it's Geddes.
Geddes?
Geddes?
Yes, thank you, Kimberly. Thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. I'm talking to you from Shutesbury, highest point between the Berkshires and the coast. And of course, we're very aware of the ceremonial landscapes here. And we've been interacting with many groups, tribes that confirm this. But I just wanted to say for everyone, one point of pressure to bring to bear on this issue is through your local historical commission. I am the chair of our historical commission here, and we've come a long way in terms of bringing this issue as a, you know, as a central, an acknowledgement of this kind of issue, and with lots of policy implications for many things, land development, etc. So the point of pressure really is to your local government,
Right.
because the Massachusetts Historical Commission, as you say, refused to recognize many of these things.
Yeah, they do. Oh, I'm so glad you're with us tonight. Thank you, Geddes.
Henry's the name. so
Henry, thank you, Henry.
it's just the
And
last name.
Shutesbury I haven't seen the sites there, but I hear it is a very rich area
Oh,
in
yeah.
Native American
Absolutely.
material culture.
Yeah. Just step out your door.
Yeah. The one, there is one other group, and they're called the Friends of Pine Hawk, and they keep the Pine Hawk site alive. They are part of the library, and this is one of the things that were done after they built the sewer. And I noticed that Denise is here tonight. She's one of the board members, I believe, of Pine Hawk, and they do different archaeological events every October and maybe a little into November, and they bring people from all over to talk about the different Native American sites and how to best protect them and the knowledge that we're getting from them. Because as I said, as archaeologists, we are taught to look at one sample. And unless you look at the whole picture, you're missing what it really means.
There's, thank you. There's a question from Carol in here that says that was also interesting and inspiring. She said, I was walking through the trail through time today. Is there any connection to Native Americans with the deserted foundation that is also there? And she said, parentheses, seems more like colonial times.
So the one at Wheeler Farm, I documented that as well. That is indeed That is the second house that was built there. That is 1840s, no doubt about it. There was an earlier one that is across the street that was probably used as the widow's house after. And that has a hand dug cellar. People are still occupying that one, but I believe that was probably the earliest house there. Now, on the other side of the brook is where we have significant Native American stone piles and where the pest house is. And I also believe that the Blood Dam, which is now known as the dam on that site, I really believe was Native American. It was built as a mud sill dam, and then it was incorporated into the original English settlement without mentioning that it was done originally by Native Americans.
Paul, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question about, and this is sort of outside, perhaps outside of the scope of the talk directly, but given that a number of European settlers arrived in boats and they were already Native Americans and they had different concepts of government and ownership of the land, is there anybody who would ever come up with an ideal way of having a compromise exist between people in this situation? There are other places where this kind of situation is also occurring, and it's occurring between the Israeli Jewish people and the indigenous Arabs over there. So they have an analogous situation to that of the European settlers and the Native Americans.
Well, Paul, I don't know the answer to that on a world stage, but I personally believe that until we acknowledge the genocide that took place, we're stuck. We're absolutely stuck. And unfortunately, the indigenous groups are not even they don't even get recourse through the courts often. So it is every treaty we ever wrote, we broke. And, yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Pamela.
I was wondering, are there any Native ancestry First Peoples that live in socialist communities? Like, or is it just people with Native ancestry that you wouldn't know were because they're living like everybody else in a house or condo or apartment or with everybody else all blended?
As I am not a Native American, I can't say I do. I have a very close friend who grew up on the Haudenosaunee Reservation in upstate New York, and their original reservation was flooded in Pennsylvania by a federal dam. They flooded the whole land, and they were all relocated to upstate New York. And they have a matriarchal society. Sorry?
Are there any reservations here in Massachusetts?
There is one, there's one in Grafton, but it's not, it's one for ceremonial purposes only. They have a nation, they have a tribal nation meeting house, and they have offices. They, you know, so a couple weeks ago, I went to see a wonderful Friends of Pine Hawk lecture that in Littleton, and the gentleman who is Massachusetts, he said they're very happy that they were Christianized because it kept it. They have the Algonquin Bible, and it is, you know, they live in both worlds. I believe, Pamela, they live in both worlds.
Yes, Denise put a link to the Friends of Pine Hawk.
Oh,
in-
thank you, Denise. There, what do we have any other in the chat? Is there a political there? Oh, yeah. I'm in Lincoln, Rhode Island. I work with Tim to go out. Oh, thank you, Liz. Thank you.
That's just my
Excellent.
info in case anyone wants to reach out.
Thank you. And I'm going to put mine in here too. AEID. This is my Gmail account. I'm having problems with my Dig account right now. So this is, and my email, and then my website. Okay. It's not up to everyone. There we go. That's me. Feel free to reach out.
It does seem like us humans, our tribes, we go and make war on other tribes all throughout human history, everywhere from everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think of something that would be just, considering that it's pretty universal. And if we try to make up for historical injustice, then we have to go through a hierarchy of oppression, oppressed groups. And I'm thinking that maybe the best thing to do economically would be to have as broad-based programs as possible, as universal programs as possible, to attack the economic oppression and inequality without separating out like Indigenous First Peoples or Blacks or race, or you can't separate out gender. So that something like, instead of reparations, if we had unconditional basic income for everyone, that would have the result of helping the most those groups that were historically most oppressed.
Andy?
Yeah, Kimberly, I think when you were starting to talk about your friend in New York, you mentioned that her tribe had a matriarchy. Could you talk about that a little bit?
That's pretty common. So the lineage in many Native American groups historically passes through the woman. And so the sachem, the leadership, it all comes down through the mother's line. The children have the mother's last name. And it's a very different idea, though the men had so there's a great YouTube video. I would have to find it. It's about Deerfield and the Native Americans who were relocated to Minnesota or Wisconsin, one or the other, that had been in Deerfield. They were the last people to sell their property. They talk about how when the English came, they had to put the women into the back, even though that they wouldn't deal with them. But it is
Kimberly, you're dropping out a little bit there.
Am I? It's still a matriarch for many. Oh, it's saying my internet is unstable.
Oh,
We
It's
believe it.
been that night, Andy, hasn't it? In many cases as well, the women owned, like in the Plains Indians, the women owned like the teepee and the horses. They were theirs. The women had the property, and the men, they got chosen by the women too. The women decided who they would marry.
oh,
Yeah, and in the Pueblos, like they often go to the woman's kiva, not the man's kiva. Did I answer Laura's question there too? Laura, put that in the chat.
Yes.
Excellent. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much.
okay,
Thank you, Kimberly.
thank you.
I have
More than welcome.
just a brief announcement. I probably should have said it at the start, but next month we're having our event on Thursday on November 8th. And I should turn this over to Jim, put him on the spot, but the topic is going to be wealth cost of the American education. Why don't you help me out here, Jim? Can you come on, unmute?
Dr. Bruce Kimball is going to be speaking on wealth, cost, and price in American higher education. He's covering the period from the 1870s to the current time. So he's taking a long look at the U.S. higher education system. And that's going to be on the 8th of December on Thursday, starting at 7. Look on our website for a sign up. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. All right, everyone, I'll close it. I'll shut down this wonderful recording.